So Scott Hammond is a renowned speaker on dealing with change in organizations, and Jennie Taylor, who we are so pleased to have with us. A lot of you know her story. I'm reading this so I can get this right. She is the civilian aide to the Utah Secretary of the Army, and she personally knows what it means to deal with diversity and to excel coming out of diversity. And she's going to talk about that, so I'm not going to talk more about that. But we're just so pleased to have them speak to us on this stage. And if you want to go and learn more about digital marketing, please go downstairs to 326. And so we'll welcome Scott and Jennie at this time. Thank you.
All right, everybody, can you hear me all right? Okay, I think Scott's going to keep asking you to come up front. So if you're in the back, come on up front. We're going to go through, obviously we're here to talk about resilience, so we're going to do a quick audience pulse check and just ask you a few questions. So raise your hand or put your hand on your nose or whatever you want to do if this applies to you. In the past year, have you had COVID? Okay. How about cared for a family member with COVID? How about lost a friend or family member due to COVID? Unfortunately, far too many. Look at that. That's devastating. Missed a significant life event because of COVID, or rescheduled or postponed or still waiting for it to happen. Let's see. Had a significant change in your business or career. You can just keep your hands up. How many of you worked from home? How many of you homeschooled from home? How many of you had 7 little children trying to figure out how in the world to homeschool from home? I really like public school. How many of you have had a death, a divorce, or an accident that hurt someone you love in this past year? So that's a pretty lengthy list. If we were to kind of go around and pass the mic, it'd be pretty overall depressing. So we'll stop there for a second, and I'll let Scott shift gears.
Now that you're all completely depressed, right? You know, because it's been a tough year, and my hand went up on most of those. How many of you have found a better health regime? You know, started exercising when you a little bit, doing some things like that. Yeah. How many of you have found a new service opportunity and found some people to help? How many of you have become closer to a spouse or a friend or a family member in this? Yeah. How many of you have shared or started a new business or found a new job in some way? Spent more time with family. I like that one, yeah. Found a new hobby, activity, or pastime. So it's not all bad, right? I'm going to introduce Jennie for just a sec. They said some things about her earlier, but Jennie's going to spend about the next 15 or 20 minutes telling her story. And she is actually just a wonderful person. Should we just go with that? She's an incredible person, but she's the mother of 7 children. And you probably saw in the news a couple of years ago that she became a Gold Star widow. And she represents the Secretary of the Army in the state of Utah to veterans organizations and speaks regularly to them. She also has a master's degree from Utah State University. So Jennie Taylor.
Hey, thanks. All right, everybody, I'm excited to be here. Like Scott said, I guess all of those things are true. I do have a master's degree here. I got my undergrad at BYU. So when my son and I come to the game tonight, like somebody's going to go home happy, whichever shade of blue wins. I want to back up a little bit. As I got to campus today, and I'm trying to figure out where to park, because when you're at a campus, there's never anywhere to park. I remembered the first time I came to campus when I was a young woman. I didn't come to school here for those first few years of college, but my high school sweetheart did. Not my husband, high school sweetheart, long story. I came up here for homecoming in October of 1998. It's a lot of years ago. And we went to homecoming, and it was lovely. And I stayed with one of my girlfriends that we'd graduated high school together, and she let me stay in her apartment, and that was great. And I parked my car, and that was great. And then I came back from the dance, and it wasn't great because the boot man got my car. How many of you have ever been booted? And the cute friend that I had stayed with played the guitar, and she wrote a song about the boot man. So kind of Adam Sandler style, because we're kids of the 90s. So as I got up to campus today, and I can't figure out where in the world to park or where in the world I'm supposed to be, I just kept singing about the boot man. So I finally paid to park, because I'm not going to risk it, because I know they're serious. They're going to boot my car, and I'm not going to be able to get out of here. I'm going to back up a little bit and tell you my story as we talk about resilience, as we talk about growth. But as I tell you my story, I hope that in it you hear your story. Because it's really easy to come to conferences like these or motivational speakers and be like, wow, that guy has an amazing story. Or holy cow, her story's so inspiring. And then it's easy to kind of walk out and think, well, my story's just my story. But I really think we all live the exact same story. So just like you raised your hand to all of these things, I'm going to ask you to think about one more series of questions. And you can either raise your hand or just kind of proverbially raise your hand to see if your story and my story look at all alike. You ready? Okay. How many of you used to dream of once upon a time? And how many of you really, really, really want to live happily ever after? See, it's the exact same story. We could be done. Once upon a time, I had a dream, just like Rapunzel. We all have dreams. I thought for sure I knew what my life would look like. I was a young woman growing up in North Ogden, Utah. I went to Weber High. I took all the nerd classes. I sang in the choir. I was in the school plays, and I was college bound. I did decide between BYU and Utah State and ended up on the south end of that decision. Graduated in teaching because I knew I wanted to teach from the time I was about 5. I never needed to take any kind of assessment or interest exam. I just knew I wanted to be in front of a classroom full of kids and tell them how to live their own dreams. So I majored in teaching, and I taught psychology and government history type of classes. Graduated from BYU, but before I did, very shortly before I did, I met this kid on a blind date. How many of you once upon a time met somebody on a blind date? How many of you it was a great experience, that blind date? Yeah, that's a total lie. Blind dates are never a great experience. How many of you it was a horrible, awful disaster of a blind date, and yet something convinced you to maybe go on date 2? So that's my story. I had just served a mission for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints down in Chile. I had come home with all of my college classes done, and I just needed to student teach. And I couldn't wait to get that teaching job and then get the heck out of Utah because I just kind of had bigger dreams than that. So I met this young man who was from Arizona who also had really great dreams. He wanted to go into politics and government. He was a born leader. And on the second, not disastrous date, because the first blind date was a train wreck, he mentioned the word Army. Now, I'm a patriotic person, and I have been my whole life. I love the country. I love the flag. I love all the things about the American dream. I was teaching history and government classes, for crying out loud. But I never thought I would be a soldier's wife. Because like the soldier was the kid who maybe had no other options at the end of high school in North Ogden, Utah, so he decided to go to boot camp. That's how little I knew. So here I was talking with this kid who wants to join the Army, thinking, why in the world do I care what this kid wants to do with his life? Well, long story short, it ended up being my life. That was January of 2003. I graduated that April. We got engaged that June. 3 days later, he walked into the Utah National Guard headquarters building, rose his hand to the square, and signed up as a soldier. And we got married in September. January, he took off for boot camp, and he was gone for the better part of a year. I was teaching in Spanish Fork in the Nebo district, and because I was married but single, it kind of made sense to continue my own education on the side. And that's when I got my master's in education, because there was a program at UVU, then known as UVSC, where I could go to school classes down there in the evenings, and then on the weekends we'd come up to campus, which is why I don't know where to park, because on the weekend it didn't matter. Or in the summer we'd have some teachers' workshops. And I was able to work on teaching and also getting my further education while he was gone. He got back at the very end of 2004. We'd been married a full year plus, and we were excited to start our lives together. So we had our first baby, we bought our first house, he graduated from college, he commissioned as an officer, we had our second baby, and then he deployed. He went to Iraq in the northern part, and immediately after did a second deployment. So during those 2 deployments, it no longer made sense for me and these 2 cute little babies to live all the way down in Utah County, because I was no longer teaching. I'd finished my master's degree, and I was driving back and forth on I-15 a lot to come to Grandma's house with the 2 little ones. So we decided we would get a short-term apartment in my hometown. Because remember, I couldn't wait to get the heck out of my hometown. So 2007, 2008, my husband did 2 back-to-back deployments in Iraq. He came home at the very end of 2008, 2009. We had our 3rd baby, and he ran for office. A lot of people ask me how he got involved in politics. I kid you not, it's because he paid the utility bill. In those days, you got a bill in your mailbox. It was paper, not digital, and the city utility bill included a newsletter. The newsletter announced the fact that there were 2 openings on the city council, and he came home with a brilliant idea one night that he should go ahead and run. That's really how it started. So 2009, we had our 3rd baby. He won his first election. He was also working on a master's program. 2010 came along. He owned a small business with my brother. 2011 came along. Predict what happens next. It's either a baby, a deployment, or an election. This time it was a baby. We had our 4th baby, and then he deployed again, leaving city council to the side for a moment with some legislation passed by Utah State where he would be allowed to just take a temporary leave of absence. That was 2011 into 2012. He went to Afghanistan. I had 4 little kids at home, and I'm a stubborn, independent woman. So I didn't need any help because, have we met? I don't need any help, right? And I was really good at not needing any help while I was like dying on the inside. Until one day I went to the bus stop. My oldest child was in 1st grade. And I remember just bursting into tears when somebody asked how I was doing. Because for too long I had said, I'm just fine, and I've got this, and how can I help you? And maybe someone's sick in the neighborhood, and I'll bring you a casserole, because me and my 4 kids were perfectly fine. When in reality, we were anything but perfectly fine. 2012, my husband came home, and would you believe it, exactly 9 years ago today, me, my husband, and our 2 oldest kids were in Disneyland. How do I know that? Because Facebook told me this morning. Darling pictures. We left the 2 babies home with grandma. We took the 2 older kids, had a great magical Disney adventure. Because if you've ever taken a baby to Disneyland, it's not a magical Disney adventure. So we learned to leave the little ones home. I think they were 5 and 7. It was perfect. We were back to living the American dream. That's 2012. 2013, we see, he got it. You know where I'm going with this. We had another baby. And I kid you not, the day I came home from the hospital from having that baby, we had grandma come over to be with that baby for a minute while I went to a meeting with my husband to discuss his plans to run for mayor. And 2 days later, we packed that baby in a car seat and the older kids and went to the U of U, where Brent graduated with his master's degree. So we were living the dream. We got plenty to do. Things started to transition. Clearly, we both love this country, and we both love having way too much to do. But that love of country and the Army had kind of become almost a side thing. And not in a bad way, like we didn't care anymore, but just he was getting older, and you don't usually put the older guys on the front line. And he had some assignment with the National Guard. I think he was over the selective service. Anybody know another word for the selective service? The draft. Like, we haven't used the draft in a while, so it was kind of a safe job. If we maybe went to war with, I don't know, Korea or China or something, he would have to help facilitate the draft for Utah. But for the most part, the guy showed up 1 weekend a month, went to Japan for a couple weeks every winter, and cashed in a little bit of a paycheck being in the National Guard. Politics, public service, community, that's kind of where everything started to go in our family. He was a great mayor. He was young. He was energetic. He had a master's of public administration, which most small town mayors in Utah do not have. He kind of knew the business side, having owned a business. He knew leadership, having served as an officer through 3 deployments. He had kind of a lot of qualities that really made him a great fit for this small town of mine that I always wanted to leave. So 2014 came around, we bought a new home. It had 1.5 acres so we could have our own little garden and place for the kids to play. We're clearly staying here forever, and I've kind of just accepted that. 2015 rolls around, we have another baby. 2016 is kind of a blur, probably because by then I had 6 babies, and I'm not sure where we were. He was busy running the city, doing his thing, working on a doctorate at the time. I don't know that I ever thought I'd go back to school or work because I couldn't even stay up on the laundry and the dishes, so that was enough for me. And then we made it through 2017. We got to August. I was 7 months pregnant with baby number 7. We kept track, right? When I got a phone call from my husband. It was a Wednesday. He was down at the Utah National Guard headquarters building, the same building where he had gone in and enlisted right after we got engaged. And he simply said, "Hey, hon, when I get home, we need to talk." It was actually a text message, not a phone call. And I remember just thinking instantly, I don't even need to have this conversation. Where are you going? Where are you going to go? So the answer was Afghanistan for a year. So he left in January, exactly 2 months to the day that baby number 7 was born. And I once again was this independent, stubborn, redheaded woman who was just going to show America what a deployed family looks like. I got the wall calendar, like the whole year at a glance, January to December. How many of you have one? And what do you do if you have a calendar like that? You buy color-coded pens because there's no way everything on that calendar can be black. So I had a color for each kid, a color for PTA. We've got soccer. I was going to show the world that I was the mayor's wife, I was the major's wife, I was the mother of these beautiful children, and I'm on my A game because there's no other game available, right? Well, that was really funny because we had a toilet in the upstairs bathroom that flooded to the downstairs and like through the side and the walls and got into the ductwork, and pretty much our house was not inhabitable. And so our insurance put us up in some temporary housing, me and a nursing baby, a 2-year-old, a 4-year-old, a 6-year-old, an 8-year-old, a 10-year-old, a 12-year-old who all liked Dad way better than Mom, and he had just gone away to war. So we were shell-shocked. We thought we'd be in that rental place for 6 weeks. That's what the insurance approved. And I'm like, 6 weeks? What if they finish in 2 or 3 and you still have to pay for the 6? That would be such a waste of my insurance's money. Anybody ever had water damage in their house? It doesn't take 6 weeks. 7 months later, we moved back into our house, kind of feeling like maybe we're going to be able to bounce back because we're strong, independent American people, and we got this. August came back around. So this time it's August of 2018. We moved back in. Everything's in boxes, but we're at least sleeping there. All the water's working. All the toilets are flushing properly. We're there. And my husband came home on leave for 2 weeks. And it was heaven. We went to Bear Lake. We took the kids to Lagoon. We didn't do a lick of yard work. It was phenomenal. And then we sent him back on his merry way to Afghanistan and said, hurry up and get this over with. It had been a really hard year. Like everything you experienced starting March of 2020, remember how that felt? Like I got a head start. I was way ahead of you. I was 2 years into this when the pandemic even hit. But we've reached October of 2018, 2 years ago right now. The weather begins to turn. The leaves are beautiful colors. The kids are back in school and starting to get a little more routine. Again, we're back at home. And I started to realize as I put a brand new calendar on the wall, the time from October to December goes really fast. Because if you can make it to Halloween, it's like Thanksgiving, Christmas, and you're done. So in my mind, it was pretty much already January, and Dad was home. In fact, in October, I went to church the last Sunday of October with all these kids. You can picture me and 7 kids at church. Like, it's fun. It's really fun, especially when it's a 2-hour meeting with no break in the middle. So here we are. We're at church. I've got the bag. I've got the Cheerios. That we were like scraping everything up on the floor before we leave because that's what we do. And a friend stopped me and said, Jennie, how are you? And I'm like, we're good. But this time I really meant it. Instead of being like, we're good, but I didn't mean it. I meant it because it felt like we were on cruise control and almost done. We were almost done. And I told him that. I even put it into words. I said, you know what? It's going to be Halloween in a minute. Then it's going to be Thanksgiving and Christmas, and Brent will be home before you know it. Now, my birthday's on Halloween, so we really like fall in our house. So I think that Sunday might have been the 23rd or 4th-ish, not sure where it fit in. Halloween was the middle of that week. Here we were having a great time with the kids, with my birthday, with costumes. I'm in autopilot thinking, man, November, December, they don't even exist. They're so fast. Until Saturday morning, 3 days after my birthday, 2 Army officers in full dress uniform knocked on my door. My 7-year-old son, Jacob, answered the door, and the 2 men told him they had a message that could only be delivered to me. Now, we could spend all day talking about what that message was and what happened next, and it's kind of a long story. Maybe someday I'll write it in a book. But the message from those two men in uniform started like this. Mrs. Taylor, we regret to inform you. And that's scripted. They don't have to think of that because it'd probably be really hard to think about that. I've often thought how awful they must have felt in that moment to be the bearer of that news. Mrs. Taylor, we regret to inform you. And in that moment, everything that I thought was really hard about 2018 and everything I'd complained about and been overwhelmed about and thought that I just couldn't do this anymore, all came crashing down. Because in that moment, I learned my husband had been killed in an inside attack outside of Kabul. And here I was now, a widowed mother of 7 children, ranging in age from almost 1 to barely 13. In fact, my baby girl Caroline had her first birthday 2 days after we buried her father. So, let's back up to the beginning. Remember once upon a time? My once upon a time never looked like that. My once upon a time didn't look a thing like that. My once upon a time was like, my husband would be governor one day or something. It certainly didn't look like that. But in the depth of it all and in the despair of it all, I'm still convinced my story continues with happily ever after, which feels a little like a slap in the face. And so I'll change one letter, and how I've learned that resilience is living happily even after. Next month it'll be 3 years. Feels like 100. It's been 3 years since my husband was killed. In the middle of that is the pandemic and everything else. Now the whole world's on a level playing field. None of us know what tomorrow will bring. We all thought we knew what normal was, and now it doesn't even exist. And yet we're learning to live happily even after. So I invite you to think for a minute as Scott comes back up here with me and we talk a little bit about what resilience is, what flexibility is, what happily ever after is. Think about your own story and the plot twist that you faced as you went from once upon a time to wherever in the world you are right now. I bet it doesn't look like it did in your head 20 years ago. And let's talk for a minute about how we get from where we feel so lost and so completely despondent to the point of being able to say, I'm going to live happily even after. Scott?
Thank you so much. So what I've done in the last 10 years in my career is interview people who've been lost. Lost in work, lost in life, and lost in the wilderness. I've interviewed about 120 people who spent more than 24 hours lost in the wilderness, thinking that they were going to die. I've been on about 500 search and rescue missions and got a chance to meet people on the worst day of their life. And Jennie and I talked and shared our different stories and our experiences, and we came up with 3 propositions that we'd like to hear from you about on these propositions, because we think they kind of work. They kind of hold water. And the first one is this: resilience is triggered by a surprise, right? Nobody ever thinks they're going to be lost. Nobody ever thinks that they're going to hear those words, "We regret to inform you." We don't. We think we're going to live happily ever after. But there's a surprise in there, and that you're forced to travel a path where you have no map. Was that your experience?
So I'm curious if anybody in this room has an experience they'd be willing to share where maybe you found that surprised and felt like you were without a map. Can you kind of come on up and we'll share the mic? I think they're telecasting this here, so I know, sorry. We'll give you like an extra cookie after, a big star on your shirt, says I participated.
There you go.
It's not what I thought I was putting my hand up for.
That's why I said it after you put your hand up.
What am I doing?
Come on up.
Come on up.
Tell the story?
Yep, please.
Okay. I was facing bankruptcy with our company, and usually get prepared for these stories. So, facing bankruptcy with our company in 2010, we sell robots, as you saw earlier, and so I was facing losing everything, and we'd laid off multiple rounds, and so our CFO was quitting that day, packing up his stuff and put it in a box and got in his car. And I was flying as a last-ditch effort to sell a robotic bulldozer to the world's largest gold mining company in Toronto. And so got on the plane, landed in Denver, and then I got the call that my son had been bullied that day and suffered from depression. And came home and said, Mom, they're telling me I must be bisexual because I have a girlfriend and they think I'm gay. And I just don't know why. And so my wife tried to console him. He was inconsolable. He took the car and left. She called the police, and he rolled in a police chase going 100 miles an hour and was brain dead. And they said, please get back to say goodbye. And so I tried to get a ticket, and they shut down the airport because of a snowstorm. And so I got in a rental car, started to drive, and they shut down the highway because of the snowstorm. So I got in the hotel, and they said they'd open up at 5 in the morning, and got on the road and got an hour or two, and then they shut down the highway again because someone had been killed in a car accident in front of us and shut the road down again. So they said he really wanted to donate his organs, so you need to say goodbye on the cell phone. And so I got to listen to his last heartbeats on the phone and said goodbye in a swirling snowstorm in Wyoming. I try to avoid Wyoming. No, I love Wyoming. So I said goodbye to him, and that was my little surprise. So the CFO happened to drive past my son on the way to his death and called my wife and said, hey, this seems odd. He seemed to be in a hurry, and so it was quite an ironic, your company's crashing, your CFO is leaving and giving up on the company, and that was an ironic goodbye. So that's the story.
I don't even know what to say after that.
Aha, I got a hug.
I'm so sorry.
I was getting that today.
That's, and even regardless of the details that each of us have faced in our lives, and yours is a very dramatic, heartbreaking one, we've all had those moments or those periods in our life where it feels like everything is crashing, and yours happened to be so physical and so real, and I can't imagine the tragedy of losing your son like that. I'm so sorry. Yeah, well, none of us would trade, right? I will say my husband's youngest brother was a couple weeks shy of 16 when he shot and killed himself after having been bullied and things in a high school setting. And that even having lost my husband and the father of my 7 children, I think that was the greatest tragedy, to lose someone so young that felt so lost, and then the devastation that follows. I'm so sorry for that.
So when we did our work on lost person behavior, and tell me if this is how you felt, lost people don't just not know where they are, they don't know how to find out where they are. That's the definition for me that's really important. And what saves us is that we kind of eventually, after a while, find that map, find ourselves on the map, and find out where we are. Was that your experience, your way out?
Man. I came as a passive participator today to learn and to grow. Let's see. Yeah, I think that definitely, just grabbing for any kind of reference. And it wasn't until, there was always this why, yeah. And where do you go and what do you do? And at least what's important. My company is facing losing everything. And then I lost something far more important than that. And so a little bit of a reference for importance, but now what the heavens do I do? And so I'll tell you what happened. So I was reading and found the story where this guy who suffered from cystic fibrosis, and always why me and why all these problems. And he went through a surgery and had this dream where he was in this room and they were teaching about this life and what you're here for and to learn and that kind of thing. And they said one of the fast tracks is cystic fibrosis, and put that up on the whiteboard and asked for volunteers. And he saw himself in the back of the classroom raise his hand and volunteer for cystic fibrosis in this life. And that was finally something that I could grab a hold of and go, oh, if I find meaning in it, then I can find my place. And so if I believed that I chose it, then there's a quest to figure out what the heck I was thinking. And so then that's what it was, and that's what my whole life is figuring out why would I have shouted for joy for this, volunteered for this, and so is that to be up here? Is it to talk to that person on the airplane who lost their child? And I seem to be a magnet for those people because that's what I get on airplanes and a lot of that suffering, and just to be able to share that different perspective. And so that gave me a reference, and so now it really is everything in my life. So if I'm in a traffic jam, then it's why the heck did I shout for joy and volunteer for this traffic jam? And then it might be that audio book I need to listen to, and that's happened. And so I embrace that, and it must be an idea on this audiobook. So I listen to an audiobook, I get an idea for the business only because I was stuck in the traffic jam, and so looking for the positive and everything. And so it gave me an orientation around meaning. And so now I obviously don't believe I volunteered for a traffic jam, but it gave me a purpose and a quest. And
I think that's great because I'm going to come back to you on our third proposition about hope. Okay, so thank you for being so willing to share.
I'll let you go back to your seat.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And be sure and comment. Tell me your name again, by the way. I didn't get it. Name. Mel, okay. Mel, we need your phone number, by the way, because I'm going to call you next time the bad thing happens to me. I'm not going to wait to sit next to you on the plane. Our second proposition as we talked about, and I think Jenny's got some important things to say about this, is that resilience is co-created. It's something that you can't, we always think of resilience as that thing I've got in my heart, that strength, the inner strength. But the truth of the matter is it was created with someone else. Several years ago, I interviewed a woman named Victoria Grover, and Victoria Grover was this can-do, tough person. She did a survival class in the 70s in the Escalante Wilderness area and lived out in the desert, self-sufficiently in the desert for 6 weeks and learned all about how to be tough. And then she moved to Maine, and when things got older, like some of us have been doing lately, and about 5 years ago, found herself in the Escalante Wilderness again, doing some solo hiking and staying in a hotel, but just kind of taking a break and a vacation. And on her first day, she went out in a place called Sand Creek, if you know where Sand Creek is, and hiked down the loop on Sand Creek. And it was a beautiful day. She got up early in the morning. She went up high on the mountains, and just it was April, and she was just having a great time. But the sun went down earlier in April than what she was used to. She could see she wasn't going to get back in time, and so she got really responsible and built a fire and built a little shelter and sat there and waited out the dark. And then early in the morning got up and hiked down to the base of Sand Creek, because she thought search and rescue was going to be coming. Her vision was, gee, I didn't show up back in my room that night. They're going to call and send rescue, and I don't want to embarrass those guys. I don't want them to fully deploy. I'm going to intercept them, and they won't have to look for me. And as she was coming down this rather steep area, it got steeper and steeper, and she had to go down a dry waterfall into this pit and drop down into it. It was about an 18-inch drop, and as she dropped into the waterfall, sand waterfall, no water in it, but just sand, she dropped down into it. She hit a rock and twisted her leg and ended up with a tib-fib fracture. And that's pretty serious stuff. Now, she's a physician's assistant. She knows she's in big trouble. She's got a tib-fib fracture. She's kind of in a pit. Nobody can see her. And she starts calling for help. And she spends 2 or 3 hours calling for help. And nobody's within 8 miles of her. Calling for help's doing no good. and she can't crawl out of this pit, and she's starting to dehydrate, and she's only got one good leg, and she can hear the water of Sand Creek 100 yards away. And she says, I need to, she stood up, I can't climb out of this wall, up this wall, it's about a 10-foot angled wall. I can't do this with one leg. And she stood there and then she said, I saw myself in the mirror. I saw myself in the mirror. I saw myself and I saw myself backwards looking in the mirror. And then she said, backwards. I can go up backwards. And she turned around and with one leg and her rear end pushed herself up and over this hump and down onto a sandy area. And as she scooted along towards the water, she got a $1, one of those little cheap $1 ponchos that you get at the dollar store. She got that out of her pack and laid it out on the ground and put anything that would burn on the poncho and skidded across until she got to the water, completely hydrated, built a fire. She had 2 matches left, built a fire, burned everything she could reach, and then buried the coals in the sand and sat on the warm sand through the cold night. And she did that for 4 nights. 4 nights. And she said to me something, it was really amazing. She said, in order to solve any of these problems, you have to see things differently. Resilience is always co-created. How do you see things differently? For her and all of these people that I interviewed who were lost, almost every one of them talked about the conversation that they had in their heads sometimes, but sometimes with the people who are there. The conversation that they have about seeing the world differently, about seeing themselves differently. So resistance is co-created. It's created by our networks. It's created by the people that we know and love.
I love that. It makes me think back to your story and talking about being able to find some kind of meaning and find some kind of purpose to the pain or to the suffering. And you can think maybe before you were born you shouted for joy and wonder, why in the world would I shout for joy for this? Or whatever framework you put it in your mind. Viktor Frankl, one of the Holocaust survivors, said the same thing. If we can find or even create a sense of meaning or purpose, then it doesn't feel wasted. It doesn't feel so much as a punishment. It doesn't feel so much the need to ask why, but rather we can start to ask how. Because why is only going to get us so far, right? Why did I take this turn? Why did my son have to die? Why did my husband go to war? Why is there COVID? Why? We could ask why all day. And yet if we can have that conversation, whether it's with another person or in our mind or with God or however we find that meaning, we can switch that question from why to how. And I look at this and I think about having this co-creation of resilience. Remember, I am a stubborn, independent, redheaded woman. I don't know that I thought I needed to co-create anything besides my children because I got this. And in fact, when my husband left on this deployment and I was standing at the gate and we were all in tears and I had all these kids and this little baby, he went into the cockpit, the pilot let him in, and we're looking out the glass and we're all crying. And then he sent me a quick text message that said, "You've got this." I wanted to punch him in the face. What do you mean I've got this? Does this look like I've got this? No, I don't got this. But I can't tell you how many times in the 3 years since he was killed, I find myself co-creating with him a sense of resilience. He's crazy enough to think I got this. He thinks I can do this. He trusted me to raise his children if he didn't ever make it back. I can maybe try to find that. Now, going back to that October that I told you was just horrific, it really was maybe the day or two before he was killed. It was for sure that very last week of October. And we had a phone conversation. We usually only communicated through Skype on text because the time difference and I had all these kids and we didn't just chat on the phone all the time. But we'd had a conversation and I think all I did was unload. Let me tell you how hard this is, how exhausted I am, all these kids and school and everything. And he lovingly just listened. I'm sure he'd smile and nod, boys. Yep, here we go. And at the end, he asked me a question that I'm going to ask each of you. And you may even want to put it in your phone or write it on your notebook because it really ties into these different strains of resilience. The question he asked me was quite simple, but it left me absolutely speechless, which is saying a lot because I am not a quiet person. The question he asked me was, What are your coping mechanisms? I had just told him how hard everything was, how tired I was, how overwhelmed I was, how much I felt like I was failing and I couldn't do this and I was so stressed and it's to the max and on and on and on and on and on. And his loving response, I'm sure he was laughing at me on the other side of the phone, but keeping it quiet so I didn't know. He simply said, Jen, what are your coping mechanisms? Now in that moment, I had none. Like Scott said on the previous slide, I didn't know what I didn't know. It wasn't a matter of feeling lost on the map. I didn't know that a map existed. Now keep in mind, this was before he died. I was lost inside of my head. I was lost. It was a really hard, dark place to be. And when he asked me that, it kind of jolted me awake to realize I don't know. What's a coping mechanism? I should do something? I should have some way to get rid of the stress or to face the stress or to deal with the hardships of life. Like that was so foreign to me because I was so lost. And as we look at this slide about co-creating this resilience through instrumental, people who maybe can offer to help you. Now we have to be careful with the instrumental piece because we sometimes think we can be instrumental and provide a resource to fix someone's problem. And I would encourage us to be really careful not to feel like we can or should fix things, but rather focus on facing things. We want to fix it for our kids. We want to fix it for our employees. We want to fix everything. And that can be very frustrating because a lot of life can't be fixed. But it could be faced. And we can have that instrumental connection to help each other. And we can have that emotional support where I might not want you to fix a dang thing anyway. I just want you to let me tell you how awful everything is right now and have you lovingly say, okay, Jen, what are your coping mechanisms? I really didn't feel that I had any. I didn't know to think about the social networks in place. Maybe I could call a sister or a friend. Maybe I could get on a social networking group that, there's groups online or things. Maybe I could find another army wife who had been through this that maybe could be someone to help me realize I wasn't going through this alone. Or having that opportunity to really think through what that weight was I was carrying and why in the world did I feel like I should carry it alone, let alone could carry it alone. And so those words, when my husband said, you've got this, really kind of came back to me when he asked, what are your coping mechanisms? And so I started to think, and I had to dig really deep at that point in my life. I had to dig really deep to write things down on a piece of paper that might actually help me feel better. And I came up with little things like listening to music. Maybe there's a TV show or a book to read. Calling a friend. Little things like that when you're in that darkness and when you're that lost, like he said, you don't even know what you don't know. And you don't even know how to answer the question, how can I help? So it's an interesting dynamic to me that after my husband died, I think because 2018 had beaten me up so much, I let go of all of that stubborn pride. And it no longer was this, I'm going to be this independent redheaded woman. I became like the most interdependent person you've ever met. And that silly little hometown that I couldn't wait to get out of is now my entire social network. And for a really long time, I had women showing up at bedtime to clean my kitchen and house while I put the kids to bed. And it was really embarrassing. Really embarrassing. You know how messy the house is by the end of the day with 7 kids, even if I've been cleaning all day? And I should be able to do this on my own. And people would bring dinner and casseroles. We talked about this before. And sometimes in our culture, we don't know what to do to fix a problem, so we just show up with food. But I've come to have a social network now where I have gotten really good at letting myself not be doing very well. Got a really hard day yesterday. Just a lot of things adding up, and I just was in tears half the day. And I was so proud of myself, not because I made it through the day, and not because I shoved aside my feelings and grinned and bore it, but because I sent a couple text messages to some friends to say, I'm not doing okay. And I really want to quit everything today. And today's too hard. And that magic of being honest, even though people around me could probably tell something is wrong because I was like crying all day, but we pretend we need to do it alone. And I love this concept of co-creation, to where my resilience only comes because there's people in my community who think I've got this. I'm like, you're all wrong, but all right, let's go for it. And when I don't got this, I can call a friend. I could text somebody. I could write in a journal. I could play the piano. I could find something, some kind of coping mechanism. So I invite each of you to think through what resources you have, and I know Scott knows a lot more about kind of the academic side of these different subcategories, but stop thinking you've got to do this alone, and stop thinking you even could if you tried. I mean, it's just such wasted energy and effort to try to just get through everything like we've got this all the time.
So there's a poet that writes business poetry. I didn't know that was a career. What do you think about that, Michael? I mean, business. David White, White with a Y. I didn't know you could spell white with a Y either. But he has a poem, and I'm not going to do the whole thing, but it says, "This is not the age of information. This is not the age of information. This is the age of the loaves and the fishes, where one good word is bread for 1,000." And I love that line, that last line, because it's what you said. It's that bone honest. I can be honest when I need something, and I can speak a good word, and you do not know how many times the good words that I've heard in the last year have borne me up and borne my wife up. You noticed I was raising my hand a lot with those questions. I actually wrote those questions. But we've had a rough year, just a really rough year with an auto accident and COVID and some other things, just health-wise. And we've both gone through it together. And one good word sometimes is bread for 1,000 for us. So our third proposition that we talked about is that hope and resilience are bonded. And when you were talking, I was thinking about that all the way, that these chances we have for resilience are fueled. Sometimes our ability to get through those require us to have hope. Victoria Grover, who I talked to you about, I said, what do you think of as hope when you talk about hope? You're sitting there for 5 days with a broken leg, gradually feeling yourself dying, waiting for search and rescue that never comes. By the way, with her, on her story, the guest ranch where she was staying didn't know that she was gone. They didn't pay attention. On Friday, when it came time to check out, they said that she had bolted, and they called the police and said she bolted and didn't pay her bill. And this wonderful guy, Nate Gardner, from Garfield County Search and Rescue, he's a deputy, but he's also the guy who runs Search and Rescue, went in and said to investigate, and he found a contract for a rental car, and he said, looked at it, and he went, I saw that car up on the Sand Creek trailhead just minutes ago, and drove up there, and immediately he knew. He called Search and Rescue. I was in New York at the time. I got a page, couldn't respond, but people were coming from all over. That's the great thing about Search and Rescue, is that if you call out and need help, there are literally hundreds of people who will come, strangers who will come. But the state helicopter found her the next morning at the edge of life, and but they thought they were looking for a body. They fly over her, they see the body, they land in a precarious place, and she sits up and waves. And at that point, they had taken all the heavy stuff all the medical stuff out of the helicopter for better weight so they could fly longer. And so they didn't have any way to treat her. And the pilots literally had to take off their flight jackets and stuff and wrap her in that, and took her directly to the hospital. And within 3 days, she was let out of the hospital. She was very brave. But how did she survive 5 days like that? She said she kept thinking about the brighter future, the brighter possibilities, the ideal future. And if you don't have a sense that the ideal future is possible, it's very hard to have hope. Do you think that's right? Yeah.
I'll admit, and I don't know how many of you have faced a devastating loss or tragic something. I'm sure we all have. In those initial days and even months after my husband died, hope was a really hard thing. And not because I'm not an optimistic person, and not because I think my life is over, and not because I think everything's just terrible, but because the entire future I had ever envisioned for 15 years had that man part of it. And because I was a stay-at-home mom, even kind of our career path was his career path. It wasn't like I had job opportunities, or I was looking for what I might do into retirement, or where I might go. Everything was tied completely to him. And I remember meeting with a therapist early after my husband had died, and he gave me a definition of hope that is so simple but so powerful. And he said, sometimes we overthink it. He said, hope is the ability to look forward to something. And that was really hard because people would say things like, oh, your best days are ahead. And then I want to punch you in the face. I don't want my best days ahead, because that implies that living without him is better than living with him. And and people will say things like time heals all wounds. Like, I'm just someday going to forget that he ever was. And so I've come to see it differently, which we've already talked about, kind of changing the framework, but the ability to look forward to something. And so there are days still, like yesterday, when the weight and the darkness of today makes it really hard to even know there's going to be a tomorrow. And that's when there's got to be some thread of hope. Looking forward to something. Maybe you're looking forward to Sunday dinner. Maybe you're looking forward to another Disneyland trip. Maybe you're looking forward to catching up with an old friend. And there's times, because my future feels so uncertain, that I almost have to make myself a laundry list of things I could look forward to. As if I'm going to run out of things to do. I don't know why I think like that, but sometimes it feels like, well, what if I wake up tomorrow and my path is so muddled that I have no idea where to go and what direction. And so I've learned to kind of create options ahead. Because odds are I don't really know what's going to happen the next 50 years, let's be honest. And so it doesn't make a ton of sense to worry about the details that I often worry about. But we can have basic goals and basic concepts of looking ahead. That hope that no matter how dark I feel, like yesterday, as I was texting a friend and he asked if I wanted him to call, I said no, because I can't talk because I'm crying. And I knew, I'm like, but I probably won't be crying all day tomorrow, so I'll call you tomorrow. I could logically know that hope still was available, even though in the moment I maybe didn't feel it. And so sometimes we've got to use the logic to remind us of the emotional hope and looking forward, that resilience. A lot of people, like Scott said, we think resilience means we're so strong and we're so great and we just bounce right back from everything and we push through to the end until victory finally comes. I think resilience is knowing how to keep going when you lose and when nothing goes as planned. And having that ability, like a rubber band, to bounce back, even if the bounce back really hurts. But the more you stretch and the more you grow, whether it's in your relationships or in your company or in your own heart and mind, that growth gets to the point where it's not like all of a sudden my grief disappeared because 3 years have happened. I'm a stronger person than I was, which makes that grief less devastating most of the time. And so I'd encourage each of you, as you're thinking of how can you be resilient as a company, in your relationships, in your life, how can we be resilient? How can we raise resilient children? We've got to be able to lose, to fail, to fall. And to know that no matter how badly we're hurt, as we lay there feeling like we've lost everything or been kicked in the face, we're going to be able to look forward to standing up again. And maybe the only way I'm going to stand up again is because you're holding me on both sides and I actually have no strength of my own, but I'm going to get back up. And that's the resilience. That's the hope. The simple ability to look forward to something. And that's how we start to live that happily even after. And it is kind of it's a mind game of surrendering what we thought it would look like. My life will not look like I thought my life would look. And I can either ask why or get to work figuring out how. If you've ever heard the expression, you can either wring your hands or roll up your sleeves, but you can't do both. So.
You know, with the lost people that I interviewed, many of them said, I can't go home again. And what they were really saying is that when you go through an experience like that, you're never the same. There's no home to go back to because that home has changed. Because you've had to let go of the once upon a time and focused on that happily even after part of it. I put up on this slide a note that I'd just like to conclude on that I think is really powerful. This was found along the Jordan River Parkway a few years ago, and somebody just posted it on a sign. And it said, by the side of the road, the cut in the river there, I fell off the side of this cliff. I don't know where I was or who found me. I was only 16 and thought my problems were so horrible that the best way to deal with them was to escape them. I was oh so very wrong. But to that early morning jogger that found me, thank you. You saved my life. I can never repay you for that. I hope you still take this path and that you somehow see it, because I want you to know that I'm okay because of you. And it's because of you that I am. So thank you. Think of those be that early morning jogger too. Think of those people that we go by, that we sit next to on the plane, that need that one good word. And then just to conclude, I want to thank Jennie for her many good words today. Thank you very much.